Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. In case you don't know, this is Bronx Net's program where we talk to reporters and writers and editors and journalists of all sort who write about the Bronx. And in our second segment today, we're going to be talking about a beautiful, wonderful photographic exhibit, and I probably should make that plural, exhibits that are going to be in our borough of the Bronx with one of the best photographic organizations in the Bronx. But to start the program, I am thrilled because I think she is the cat's meow. She's a tremendous reporter. She is actually the digital editor and a reporter for the Bronx Times. It is my pleasure to welcome Aliya Schneider to the program. Nice to have you, Aliya.
Thanks for having me.
As you know, it's been a long desire of mine to have you on because you write such good stuff. We use this program to let people meet the people who write in the borough of the Bronx. So, who are you? Where are you from? How did you get into journalism? What inspires you? Let's just do a little background of you so people can say, "Oh, that's Aliya."
Okay, so I'm actually from Vermont. My parents were both from New York City. I have family here, and I always kind of had a desire to be here. And I think I knew I'd end up working in the city. I How did I get into journalism? I started out kind of freelancing at local papers in Vermont. I'm class of 2020. I went to Barnard College. And so I was sent home to finish my senior year, and that's where I started freelancing for local papers. And then I ended up working at a daily paper about 2 hours upstate in Hudson, New York, and covering the city of Hudson as well as Columbia County. And then I worked a little bit in Westchester while freelancing for the Bronx Times. That was kind of last summer until coming on full time in November.
Mhm. So what inspires you? What made you say, you know, I like this idea of reporting news or writing about news? Was there a light bulb that hit? Was it something you always wanted to do? Were you a good writer originally? What got the juices flowing, so to speak?
So I've always loved writing. I've always been very curious. I like being in the know, very nosy, as a lot of journalists are, and I enjoy telling stories. But I actually, it took a while for me to put two and two together that reporting was kind of the thing for me. I was really interested in photojournalism when I was a college student. At Barnard, we didn't have a journalism major, but I majored in urban studies with a concentration in political science, which
Mhm.
finding very relevant in my day to day at the Bronx Times. And I did take classes at the Columbia J School, the Graduate School of Journalism, which I learned a lot.
Oh.
I loved it. But I really thought I wanted to be a photojournalist. And then actually when COVID hit and I was freelancing, I started out doing photography because I would do that already during my college breaks when I would go home for the local papers. And then I realized I'm doing a lot of writing. I was writing a thesis for school for urban studies. I love
And
researching.
and so then you just said, "You know what? I ought to put this together and do it for real."
Yeah,
Right?
so I just
Yeah.
started doing both and I was
You
like, reporting's a lot. I mean, I love photography, but I just found reporting to be so much more fun, like putting the pieces of a puzzle
Right.
together.
We interview, as you know, we interview a lot of journalists, a lot of young journalists, and you get the details right, and you look for details. And I just love reading. I hope people are reading the Bronx Times. I love reading what Aaliyah writes. She writes some of the most important stories in the borough of the Bronx. Let's get to a couple of those. This whole notion of rezoning in Community Board 10 on for a project on Bruckner Boulevard has, you know, lit a fire under the entire community because there are people who say, "Hey, we need housing." And then on the other hand, there are others who say, you know what, we don't want this in our neighborhood. We were zoned earlier that these things wouldn't happen. And so they're saying you can't do this to us. Let's answer that question of the headline. Where are we at with this proposal to turn a supermarket into housing and a kind of a different kind of project?
Yeah, so I think that there's a sense of victory from the residents who don't want this to go through because the community board really adamantly opposed it. There was one member who kind of very quietly was not against it. And the council member, Marjorie Velasquez, she has stated multiple times that she's against it, but there's still a lot left in the process. The borough president has a hearing and she gives a recommendation There's a city planning process. There's ultimately the city council process, and then the mayor has the ultimate say in the end. So there's still other hurdles to go through, and I'm really interested to see, if the developers are going to tweak their proposal, or if the city council is going to go against the local council member when
Right.
typically, the local council members' opinion weighs pretty heavily, but the developers haven't given up.
But yeah, and also, that it does happen. I mean, I know that, in the Northwest Bronx, there was a filtration plant built over the objection of, at that time, Oliver Capel, and that was an example of a movement to make it happen. Plus, the mayor has come out supporting rezonings, and that, would one would think begin to play somewhere in there, so there is more to go. I tell you the one thing, and I told you I was gonna surprise you a little bit. The one thing that bothers me directly is that Councilmember, Velasquez, did not attend the community board meeting that you wrote about, because she said she had received, threats of violence. I gotta tell you, this to me was this is an absolute outrage. It is criminal to, threaten a council member. I'm sorry that she didn't, do it, but, she didn't, attend that meeting. I just think it's a complete outrage. I think there should be an investigation to find out who made those threats, and that should never happen, and I don't care how fraught the issue is, but you can't threaten a council member from attending a meeting and saying, "If you show up," that made me angry. I don't know if you don't even have to comment on it. That's Gary's comment. I just think that is absolutely unacceptable, and we can have good dialogue, but we don't need that, and whoever did it was wrong, and there should be an investigation to ferret that out. That's Gary's point. If you
People
wanna
have
comment, you can.
Well, I will say that, despite the council member saying time and time again that she does not support this proposal, people have been very critical of her. At the meeting that photo is from, which was the community board meeting before the one she had the threats, she gave a speech, and some people were kind of nitpicking what she said. Nitpicking is the word that the council member used when she was talking about this afterwards. And they felt like she wasn't being specifically against it enough. She was kind of
Right,
trying to make a positive turn and saying, "What would you want here instead?" And people didn't really want to talk about that.
right.
They were just really angry about the project. So she's definitely faced a lot of criticism, despite, she will say to the press, she'll say over and over again, "I don't support this." So,
Th this
yeah.
This is why you're a journalist and I'm just a loudmouth talk show host. I told you what I think, but you gave us a very proper background. Her objections, as reported by Aliya Schneider in the Bronx Times, are that she thinks that if you're going to build housing and build a community, you need more money for, other infrastructures like schools and health facilities and all those other things. She didn't come out and say, "I'm against rezoning." And that I think is what the issue was. So we'll see what happens. I know you'll be, following it, step by step, and everybody will read it, from you, in the Bronx Times. I will, and, so we appreciate your work on that. The other thing that, came up that you have written about is Legionnaire's disease. Now, and the fact that we've had, cases of Legionnaires in the Bronx again. I remember that we had them, in the past. There's, the story that you wrote, back at the beginning of this month, about, a Legionnaire's problem. What is frustrating to me about that is that we had it in the Bronx. One would think all the cooling towers were already inspected, and, apparently they weren't. So, just, what's your thought about it? I guess the second part of it is then Verizon was then sued because their cooling towers were not inspected. So just give us a little background about that, if you would.
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of this more recent legislation from about 2015 requiring these inspections and requiring kind of like registering these cooling towers was in response to an outbreak in the Bronx. And now we're seeing another one. So I'm really interested in looking
That's
at
right.
like, well, if, I think of the Twin Parks Northwest fire and how there's all this legislation responding to it. And it's like, well, if this didn't work for this issue, are we going to see this in other issues? So we're really
Very good
our
point.
eyes
Yeah.
on this moving forward and looking at, how did this happen when there was this legislation in response to a past outbreak, and how we
This
can.
yes, this is basically what I was alluding to, is that we had the problem. One would think after that, we would have inspected all the cooling towers. Historically, I mean, this goes back to before you were a reporter here, but historically, we've never had enough inspectors working for, the, housing, department in the city, and so, violations would just flourish, and unfortunately, it happened in, this case. Um, we just have a moment or two left. Aliya, this is a I'm sorry to stick you with it. What are you working on? What's good? What can we look at? And one of the reasons that we haven't been able to get her here is because she's always busy. So I know you're working on stuff. Is there something you want to give us a tip that we ought to be looking at and looking for in the Bronx Times?
Well, I think as more information comes out about the Legionnaires outbreak, we're really on top of that. They're investigating that right now, and we really have our eyes peeled about, why this happened, and we're just trying to get more information. But I honestly have this giant spreadsheet of all these stories that I'm working on and I want to do. There's just so many stories in the Bronx. And as you know, I wear two hats at the Bronx Times. I don't just report, I also help with social media and managing the website. I help Chris with editing. So I'm kind of all over the place. But there's a lot coming, that's for sure.
I wish you would leak that document to me, but I guess I can't get that. That's okay. That spreadsheet, that's what I'm looking for to
Oh,
find
the
out what find out what's actually going on. And as regards that, the Bronx Times people, I get a daily email. I think we've got about 30 seconds. Tell me a little bit about is that difficult? Do you enjoy doing that? And because the materials the Bronx Times is putting out, as I said to you privately and have said publicly, are fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we're a really small team with really big ambitions, and I think that we're doing great, kind of reaching some of our goals, and we just have a lot more, and we have high aspirations, and it's exciting to be a part of.
Aliya Schneider from the Bronx Times, thank you so much. Say hello to all my buddies over there. We appreciate everything that you do. I can't speak for everybody else. I'm a big fan, and I hope that you keep telling us what's going on because we don't know and we need you.
Thanks so much.
Great. All right, we're gonna take a short break. When we come back, Gary will change hats and or put on a hat, and we'll talk to the folks from Enfoco, which is one of the best photography organizations in this borough of the Bronx. So the Bronx Buzz will be back right after this.